Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our April meeting of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Committee. Actually, I got that backwards, and I knew Will was going to correct me as soon as the words came out. The Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety Committee, to be aligned with our documents. So thank you for being here. We have, as normal, a pretty full schedule, and we'll get right into that. We have all our team available, I think today, except Carl. Mr. Tull, he is actually out of town for a medical situation, and our chief of police is actually in Boston on vacation. He sent me a picture of his family at a Fenway game the other night. So all right. I can't imagine Fenway or our committee on a Thursday morning. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Do we have a motion to call the meeting to order?
I so move.
Thank you, Diane.
Second.
Art, second. Vote? Unanimous? Okay, thank you. The agenda is shown above. This hasn't changed since we sent this out a couple weeks ago, I think. I don't think there have been any significant or any changes at all. We'll, as it's noted, the really big box of work today is we're going to do a debrief on our workshop that we had in March. We've gotten some good feedback from that. We wanted to share that. We're honored to have Matu Carter here from the University of Delaware T2 group. He was actually here with us last year, and he's going to give us some sense on how to, the process and procedures around determining speed limits. Remember that came up a couple meetings ago. Heidi Simon raised the issue. There were some changes made. Right. Our former mayor sort of reached out and made a couple calls, and then all of a sudden we had a guest speaker with us here to speak to it, and we've had some conversations about it. So, Matu, thank you for being here. And then the last part is we have the traffic group report that we sent out to you, I think about a month ago, and we're just going to do a debrief on any key takeaways from that. Not a detailed page-by-page review, but what are the key takeaways, all right? And then we'll sort of then transition. The last part will be our planning for the upcoming season. And our famous spreadsheet will come to light again. So, so do we have a motion to accept the agenda as it's presented, or any changes?
I so move.
Thank you, Diane. All right, okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So the safety contact I wanted to share, and these all might not be exactly right. I was actually doing this from memory, from coming from golf and from coming from Dewey yesterday. So these might not all be right, but the key thing is, as some of you have seen, some of you have shared, the speed limits have been significantly, or have been changed between basically Dewey and the Delaware State line in Fenwick. And the key highlight is the maximum speed's been reduced from 55 to 50, but there's been some incremental changes as you go through the various towns and the transitions. And I think, and we don't have to get into each one of them uniquely, but I think the intent with DelDOT was to sort of make this sort of whole journey from Fenwick up to Dewey in terms of the changing in speeds around the different communities somewhat consistent rather than a little bit, and there's more transition built in. So you're going from not 55 to 25, like if you're going to Bethany or Dewey now, there's actually a 35 before you get to the 25, right? Slow people down a little bit sooner. All in that vein. So there, again, I'm not going to place a lot of money on the accuracy of every one of those, but it's what my memory was telling me. And I didn't have a really great round of golf, so that could have influenced what I was remembering too on that.
But there are some Coast TV articles that detail these changes.
Yeah. So this is getting a lot of ink, and which is great. Obviously, it'll be a transition. We can probably expect there'll probably be some people that are really excited about it, and there might be one or two people that aren't as excited, and that's all good. That's what it's about. This has been a really lengthy process DelDOT has led, and I'm really proud. I'm personally proud of their efforts because they really listened to a lot of the input. And a key driver on this too, I can't without, is Seth Hammond and the North Bethany Coalition, because I think that's really where a lot of this began years ago. And there's another workshop coming up, I think in June 3rd or 4th,
It's the beginning of June, right?
in the beginning of June at the library. But this is all sort of tied to that, and we can speak some more. But I thought that was a really good, would be
Yeah,
a
I
good
thi- I think
safety
it's-
contact for us.
Mickey, I believe it's June 3rd from 6 to 8.
Yeah, at the South Coastal Library, right?
That's my understanding.
Awesome, super. And the other thing I wanted to show, and I wasn't able to load those up, but there were some really good pictures that Art took, I believe, recently of signage. And we all have it. It was in the, when Art responded back, but I wanted to get a couple of those in here, but it got to be too late last night, and my mind and fingers and head weren't working very well. So, but there are really some really good ones around keeping people aware, and they were unique. They were different, right? And so a unique signage is really important to keep people's attention and see something differently. All right?
No, exactly. I mean, I think the signs that I sent examples for, I mean, that one that's up on the Georgetown Lewis Trail that
Yep.
just shows that, you know, that basically that you're supposed to let people know when you're passing them, whether you're a biker passing a runner or a runner passing a pedestrian.
Right.
It very, very simply conveys the message. It doesn't have a lot of text, but it's easy to absorb, and I thought that was a very effective sign. The second one I sent was right out here by the G&E supermarket. That's the exit heading out towards Fred Hudson Road, which again talks about look both ways for bikers, which again I think is a very effective. Again, it's a very simple message, but it's presented very well.
Right.
And then the third one was that what I mentioned in the workshop is just that sign that they have along the highway up by Home Depot in Lewis, which again says, I think it's look twice, save a life.
Right.
Again, just makes people conscious of what they're
Right.
doing. And then the second part of it was watch for bicycles.
Right.
Yeah. So I thought that all three of those were just very effective because they're very simple, very easy to understand, but I think they kind of drive home a number of points.
Right.
So I just served those up to the group to see if, people were interested, and, perhaps some of this stuff might be able to be incorporated down here. I don't know.
Yep.
But it was worth at least throwing it out there.
Yep. So, and I think you're highlighting a couple really key points. One, thank you for noticing them, and then taking the next step, taking a picture and sharing it with the team. But I think any of that signage, signage is, having been in this field for quite a while, is like wallpaper after a while. This room could be bright pink and would stand out, but if you come in here for 6 months, after a while, you don't even notice it. So a new sign with a different flavor, different context, will grab people's attention, right? Now, might not grab their attention for 10 years, but it'll help now. And so I think what you're seeing that has really, I think, prompted us. Maybe we can look at some unique ways to change some things within Bethany, just to raise that situational awareness for folks when they see something that's different, unique, right?
Exactly. I think, again, advertising, I'm not an advertising expert, but, if you keep the same message out there, people are going to tone it out. But if you alternate your message and the way it's transmitted, chances are people are going to be more receptive to it. So I think that, we can consider all sorts of things, but I think if we continue to message in a manner that people are receptive to, I think that would really be of good use for us. Now, again, I do notice that, like, up in Lewis, they had that one kind of roadside sign, which, again, has the message that I just mentioned. There's two right here in Bethany, the similar roadside message boards. Do we have a say in that, or is that the state that puts the message up?
So the state puts the message up, but I think we have the ability to add something to that sign. That is handled by the police department.
Okay. Now, I was just wondering, again, it's because, again, I noticed, like, when I drive up to Wilmington, they'll constantly change the messages on those boards. And in
Yes.
turn, then, when I see that, I'm like, oh, this is new. I want to pay attention to this. So, again, we might want to consider, those two opportunities with those message boards and, again, rotate different messages in there that would, again, catch people's
Yeah.
attention and really kind of reinforce what we're trying to communicate.
Yes, they do get rotated because they're on the same plan as all the signs on Route 1. This one gets rotated.
Okay.
I don't know that we've really thought about what we could put up there other than safety messages, which I think is why they're there. I think they're meant initially for safety,
Through
for
Delta.
like weather, the
Through
Delta
Delta,
signs.
right? So can we personalize those for the town, or is it?
I think we have a little bit of wiggle room, we can't
They
take
need
it
to be
over.
consistent with their messaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I want to,
Go ahead, Diane.
I
I'm
want to
sorry.
thank Art too for that, because I think we do get used to signs, as you mentioned, because walking and running on one, with the intersections that are coming from Bethany or the other side, cars come and they only look one way, because they're only looking at the cars that are coming up the highway, where they're trying to go in. So I think maybe a more colorful sign or something like that on those crosswalks might help.
And I, be honest with you, and I think to build off of Teresa's comment, because of the work we've done with DelDOT over the last couple of years, I think they're very, and you'll see, actually in some of the feedback we're going to get to in a little bit, one of their comments was how impressed they were with this whole, even the workshop we had, the involvement, the engagement, the creativity. So I think we've developed some good relationships with DelDOT, so I think we can build on that. And I know Chief Foley and his team are really connected with them, so I think we can be creative and,
I think so.
yeah.
We just can't completely take it over.
No,
Right.
and I don't think we want to, really. I mean, it's just, 'cause
Well,
that's,
again, going back to the WAVE situation, I think WAVE is a wonderful campaign. But I think, again, if we can rotate the messages that we're conveying through WAVE, I think that will be even more effective. Because again, if people, for example, like on the website where we have that little section about WAVE, if that message just stays similar, or exactly the same, I think people are just going to kind of bypass it. But if we've got a different message, from time to time, again, that would allow us to reinforce different themes. Because again, when the workshop came along, it was interesting listening to all the different communities. And many people have the same type of concerns and
Yep.
things that they're trying to deal with. So again, I think messaging can be very helpful. And again, updating various ways to convey this shouldn't be a big deal, but I think it could be very effective for us.
great. Thank you, Art. So we'll move into the town leadership reports. Terry, I don't think we have anything from the town specifically. Okay, we are moving ahead, obviously, with our two of the larger projects right now that are later in the year with our completing making this a four-way intersection out here, and also putting the crosswalk in farther up on 26. That was reported at the last council meeting. So that's two big infrastructure projects that are ongoing.
The project on Route 26, where we have the median, median, we want to put, for people to cross. And then there's this project with the sidewalk and the crosswalks here. We have applied for community reinvestment funding for some of that. So
Awesome.
hopefully we'll get that.
Great. And there's actually a smaller project, we reviewed it with Brett and living in Bethany West, for the second entrance coming out of Bethany West by the diner. That's a little bit of a precarious situation because of the, it really probably wasn't designed for the kind of activity it has now. So we actually have a design for that. It won't be until probably the fall, but it's really driven by pedestrian safety, because right now it's a free-for-all with cars moving in, moving out. So I think we have a really good plan to sort of mitigate that, and we're going to be reviewing that with the community a little bit. But that's probably of those three, that's the small one of the whole thing. But good stuff, though, moving ahead. So there's nothing to report from the police department. Again, other than Chiefs having a great time up in hometown Boston. I actually got to 2 games in Fenway. It's really made me envious, but I was going to show a picture of him with him and his mom or his wife and 2 boys at the game. It's just awesome, right along the third base line, and good stuff. So activities and events. Julie, anything to share? You want, please?
Yes, some of these might be overlapping further down the agenda, but right now I'm looking into reordering some of our merch items to keep the inventory up to sustain all these events. Namely, the shirts are low. We have a new rep there, so but we should be able to get them. I don't think we'll have enough for the Ocean to Bay bike tour, but if you recall last year, didn't we decide not to do shirts because they were getting the bike shirts anyway, and it was just more important to get the brochure out and the helmet stickers. We have plenty of those for now. And then, so we'll have enough for Poseidon and then for the craft show.
Okay.
It would make more sense, I think. As far as...
We are reordering those, right?
Yeah.
The shirts.
We have plenty, just the shirts mainly and the stickers. We have plenty of brochures. We still have the bags.
And the same, I think Julie, what you said is it'll be the same design, same color, the whole thing, it's just,
Yeah, I'm going to shift some of the sizes, though. Less large sizes and go with the
great.
smaller.
Fantastic.
And then if we want to give them out for the
Yep.
international students, again, we could do that.
Yep.
So, and do you want me to jump to messaging or wait till we get to the?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Please.
And this kind of goes into the next point about the takeaway from the learning workshop. I think the messaging cadence is important, and we've been trying to do that and working on that. And we're sort of in sync with what ABC Bike Ministry was trying to do. Just get out the key reminders, key concerns, just to change behavior. The three main takeaways that I got from that were the concerns from the community: motorized bikes versus scooters. That's a big issue right now. Wearing a helmet and the consequences of not. I mean, there are the obvious ones, but maybe there are some legal ones that we can dive into. And also be aware of bikes when getting out of cars. So those are the 3 points that we're going to focus on with messaging right away. If there's any others that you think that should be primary, let me know, and we'll work on those. And also along those lines, I spoke with Chief about our messaging, because a lot of times we'll share what the police says and vice versa, but some of those things need to come from the PD, not from events. So we're working on ways to get that, the best way to get that message out.
Good.
Okay?
Good. Yeah, and, you know, to follow up on that, the, what ABC shares, and they're sort of taking it on themselves, right? They're creating these really short vignettes of videos, if you will. They're really cool, right?
Yeah, I spoke with them about
Created
that.
one for us for the, you shared, and so
Yeah.
we can be creative and innovative and thoughtful about how do we do that, and that's all the, yeah.
Yeah, and the person that does that for them, they don't outsource. It's one of their volunteers, and that's what his background is.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, that worked.
awesome.
That's very helpful, yeah.
So it's been called to my attention in my zest to get to the rest of the agenda, I forgot to do the review and approve the minutes from 2/27. So whoever on this side of the dais passed the note, thank you. I actually, usually I put the notes in the workshop, I mean, in our meeting, just so we can actually see it. But since it was a month ago or 2 months ago, you guys got those in advance. I didn't see any changes that came back from anyone. So, do we have a move to approve the minutes as presented?
I so move.
Diane, thank you. All right, thank you.
All in favor?
Okay.
Anything to bail you out, Mr.
Yeah, thank you. You know me, I love, and there's many opportunities for that, Dan, so that is not a bad thing. All right, I'm having a tough time advancing this, Will, for some reason. It's on. I did that. I just want to get to the next. So we just want to go through and do our reflections from the workshop. And this was, again, I'm not going to go through, this was what our charter was, sort of our design, was about engagement, involvement, not being judgmental, just listening and sort of prompting each other of what we're doing, what we're working on, and to raise both successes as well as opportunities for us. And I think that was the plan. We had a robust group. I mean, I think that was even more folks than we had last year. Mm-hmm. We had DelDOT, DENREC on either end, and basically 9 communities or community groups, including ABC, present. So that was our agenda. So what I did next, and these aren't in any particular order, but these were just the learnings we got that you all shared with me. I know everyone reached out to everyone who participated and asked for any feedback, and what I tried to do is capture these. Some of them were duplicates or had a similar theme, so I just combined some things together. And these are all done sort of anonymously. I'm not putting who said what. But DelDOT, you know, I did want to capture there. It's great to see everyone, and it's inspiring to see all the good work and camaraderie the communities have. So that was, you know, from Anthony, that was excellent. Deeper understanding of the event efforts being made in all communities. Folks like the diversity of speakers and perspectives. Worthwhile endeavor. This whole idea of collaboration, cooperation, coordination being the key. I want to come back to the stress the bike and pedestrian pathways, because there's a couple things that are more action items and others that are a little bit more generic. So I want to come back to those. I should have grouped them a little differently, but interesting to hear all the community commonalities, right? So some of us doing web pages, newsletters, videos. And very excited. People like the focus we're putting with the J1 students for both from an ABC, Mariners Bethel, as well as Bethany Beach. So those were just sort of the general comments. Did anyone else have anything else, just in a general flavor? I want to go back and cover the more specific ones in a second, but anything else that I missed maybe in your notes to me or anything? Please, Mark.
Yeah, I was, one of the things I was struck by was, DelDOT said that they would be happy to work on a regional, work with, not just us, but with all the communities on a regional plan, which I mean, that sounds really great.
Yep.
That's something to think about, I think.
Yeah, and I think that was also reiterated by Denrick, right? And he was actually, I felt like sort of asking for that to help generate some gas. And I want to come back to that because that comes back to something Dan lifted up. So let's go back a little bit. There are a couple things that are a little bit more specific. Future focus on connected, low-stress bike and pedestrian paths. So that's part of that. Okay, that was a common theme. And then if you move down a little bit, need a heightened sense of urgency to address the Camp Barnes Parker House Road segment. Dan, that I know came from you, and actually Dan has a thought about trying to get that ball going a little bit. So Dan, could you share that a little bit, if you don't mind?
Thank you, Mickey. Just a reflection on a conversation that Carl and I have had for at least 150 years about that particular stretch of road, and I'm delighted that we got the light turned on to what's going on, and there was a comment about if we came together, we might be able to get some assistance and some guidance on how we could get that area addressed. And what I was thinking of was, and I've got two proposals along these lines. By the way, and I want to echo what Mark said, and Mickey, your good summary. I just thought the meeting was great, and a lot of collaboration and a lot of support mutually. And maybe sometimes some of us can step out a little bit more than the others. And there are two areas that I wanted to recommend to the committee that we look at. One is this is what I call it, road to Camp Barnes. At some point, it becomes a death trap. And if I'm not back at the next meeting, it's because my wife and I are trying to go out there this afternoon. But the idea that we might be able to find a way to close the gap now, because it stops the road improvements stop at one point and don't go all the way out to Camp Barnes. If we could have like a subcommittee to focus on it, and I would volunteer Carl, since he's not here, to lead
I've
the
got
effort.
somebody else I'm thinking of to volunteer too.
I don't know. I've been volunteered when I've skipped meetings. This is a real thing on that committee.
Yeah.
You get
So,
volunteered when you don't
So
come.
I tend to think that Bethany can sort of take the lead on this
Yeah.
and encourage the other
Yeah.
communities to join in with us, and then we can deal with the DelDOT folks who can give us the good counsel
Yeah.
that we need to do that. If I may, I can kill two birds with one stone here. The other thing that I mentioned in my notes to you, then thank you for identifying it, is the strategies for dealing with e-bikes. And in the interest of transparency, I'm an old man. I just bought an e-bike. So I know how fast and dangerous they can be, and I did a little homework, and there is a ton of recommendations out there about how to deal with them safely, not only for the individuals who ride them, but the communities who experience them. There's an association that looks at this. Police departments around the country have developed policies and procedures for dealing with e-bikes. What I'd like to suggest is that we do another special effort there, because I think we can make a lot of progress, not just here in Bethany, but all up and down Delaware's roads. And I would be happy to volunteer for that one, and tap into the resources that I have that we can bring to the table and get some, rather than trying to, they say, reinvent the wheel. I think we've got a wheel that's already been invented.
Yeah.
And we can pick and choose the best parts of that would work for us. So if that makes sense, I can stop, Mr. Chairman.
That's awesome, Dan. I think that's certainly one of the commonalities that came up, because everybody talked about e-bikes and scooters in some degree of exasperation, fear, concern, whatever, for all the right reasons. So,
Well, I think, again, it's a relatively new
yeah.
item. And in turn, from when I've talked to people from the state, I don't think there's an awful lot in the way of formal rules out there in terms of how to deal with them. So again, if we can perhaps be part of that development, I think that would be wonderful.
So,
If I may, Art, and by the way, the sources that I have looked at also have signs like crazy all over the place. There's even one drastic proposal there that if you put sort of a stop stick that goes the wrong way, so if somebody's riding an e-bike or a bicycle or a scooter for that matter on a bike path, you can put up something that'll puncture their tires. That'll stop them from doing it. It goes to pretty extreme measures, I'm sure. But there are lots of good ideas that I think we can choose. And again, signs, regulations, way to patrol. One recommendation that I read about was that perhaps you need to supply your police department with a couple of e-bikes so they can patrol on e-bikes and stop the e-bikes if they're in a problem. Some kind of because we did hear from the departments that there was a little hesitation not to enforce the law, but how you do it. And
Right.
if you've got a patrol car pulling over a 10-year-old on a scooter who's not in the right spot, that's more of a headache than anything else. My articulation, not anybody else's.
No,
But I think there are ways we can help soften that and soften that image, and also get some safety accomplished.
awesome. And that would be, I think, Dan, as you're proposing, would be a great one in addition to what we can do, but that's a perfect one to reach out and with other communities, right? Because they're all talking about it, and if you're on an e-bike, you're not just going from, the beach to town hall, you're going all over the place. So, does anybody want to jump up and sort of team up with Dan on that one? I mean, we don't have to decide now, but does anyone?
Julie just raised her hand.
Yeah, Julie doesn't have anything to do these days, it's just,
Throw that other ball in there.
Well, the other thing, if I may, just again, I think there's an awful lot of commonality to what we're all experiencing as, coastal communities here. And I think the workshop was great. And the only thing, and I don't exactly know how to do this, but if there was some way we could maybe have an ongoing communication process with our neighbors here, because again, if Mariners Bethel's putting together a series of videos to help, enhance safety, I think that's great. I really do. But, if they do it and we do it and Lewis does it, and if we're all just basically duplicating efforts, that may not be the most effective use of resources.
Right.
Whereas if we maybe combined our thought process, we perhaps could come up with better products and in turn have a more consistent message delivery. Because again, I mean, Julie hit on a lot of the really good themes that I think we need to emphasize. Again, obviously wearing helmets, being aware of car doors and staying, clear of them. I think there's an awful lot more. I think, again, you need to be, again, communicating when you're passing people. I think you need to slow down when you come up upon people. I think you need to wear bright, reflective clothing, especially if you're biking in the evening. I think you need to have lights on your bike if you're biking after dark or before, sunrise in the morning. There's a lot of different themes that I heard from the groups, and it was consistent. I mean, but again, we can do all the, like I said in the meeting, we can do the structural things, we can plan that and execute it, but a lot of this is behavioral. So if there's things that we can do to just make people more aware that we're all in this together, whether we're e-bikes, rollerbladers, if people are still doing that, runners, walkers, regular bikers, we all just need to be aware of what's going on and share the space. I think that's the real key. And as long as we're respectful, I think things will work out really well. So what I'm getting to is, if you want more ideas in terms of ideas to emphasize, like again, wearing the helmet, wearing reflective gear, I can send you a list if that would help.
Okay.
thoughts that I have, but there could be a larger picture here in terms of the communities and all the way we present this. So just a thought.
So Art, if I could, remember, and I didn't put it in the deck just because I thought we had some other stuff, but remember our umbrella chart, right? Which I really like, because that's the whole
Yeah.
issue around engaging people behavior. Because we can put all the signs up we want.
Right.
To be quite honest with you. And some people are gonna notice them, some people aren't gonna, or they're gonna notice and they won't follow it. Where we really change behaviors, you gotta engage people, you gotta talk to people, you
Right.
gotta, and that umbrella are all those topics, right, in bite-sized chunks. So, I think we've got a lot of material, I think we've got a lot of space to use, and we've got a lot of community partners that are starting to fill that, and I think we can, that's, ABC sounds like we're very well to share what they're doing, and we can, what we develop, we'll share with them, right? And then likewise, and you get this, so it's not, I think it's great to have the diversity of different folks looking at even maybe the same topic in a different way, right? That's good, right?
Right.
But we can all share that so that we can all take advantage of it, rather than just design it and put it on the box or put it on the app and leave it there, so.
I think we could all learn from each other.
Yeah.
So that's just a thought. And there'll be some things that work, some things that won't work. But again, if we can get a great idea from Lewis, or they can get if Fenwick can get a great idea from us, then we all win.
Okay.
Well, one
So-
thing is, excuse me,
No,
Mickey,
please,
but
please, Julie.
it is working. So when you said having the same thing on the website is getting stagnant, yes, it does, but it also reinforces the program. They see the logo there, then they'll spot it somewhere else. And when we did that survey after the summer, 60% of the people were aware of WAVE.
Yeah.
So that was pretty impressive, so now we got to work on getting the rest of them aware, so that we can keep messaging them with, and then new messages, so that they can still see, okay, now what's WAVE up to? What did I miss? Just to keep it going. WAVE 3.0, right?
So let's do this. Let's, back to Dan's point, I would be glad, Dan, if I'd partner with you on that.
Sure.
And if anybody else wants to jump in, but we'll take the ball and sort of run with that. The other one was, and that's around the e-bikes and scooters. The other one that we talked about was the Camp Barnes Road and the like. So Carl, I guess, is interested.
Yep.
And does anyone else want to have any interest in that one?
Carl and I have been working together on this.
Okay, so you can-
Complaining together for years.
Double duty, okay, good.
Sure.
So, that's so awesome. So we'll, that's fantastic. And obviously, any help, support, Dan, all right, holler, but that's great. Okay, fantastic. Did we cover, vehicular speed mitigation was a particular topic came up. Obviously, we've seen an improvement in that, and we're going to have a speakers help us with that understanding. The other one that came up was the bicycle repair I think this was from Carl, actually. Yeah. Bicycle repair stations and water bottle refill stations, they are in other areas, and potentially something we could incorporate. So, again, just before we keep moving, any other thoughts, perspectives from the workshop that I missed when I was trying to pull all this together? Did we cover it all? Oh, actually, the most important thing, I gave each of you a copy. Once we got done the workshop, we're going to be putting out a newsletter for the town, and a couple of us were leaving literally the next day. And Mark willingly just jumped in and put together a draft, or not draft, this is basically it. This will go into our next Bethany Beach newsletter from our committee. And it's a great job of really summarizing the workshops. You all have a copy of that now? Yes. And so Mark, thank you very much. And boy, it really covered the scale. So go ahead.
It's a relatively small thing, but one of the things I learned at the workshop that I was pleased to see is there's a committee like ours in Lewis, so that kind of creates a natural partner for us to work with.
Right. Absolutely. And so when we're reaching out and thinking about some of these other projects we're talking about that are beyond just Bethany, they're great avenues to connect with, Great. Okay, let's go to The next block, and this sort of went particularly around the speed mitigation, we're excited to have with us Matthew Carter. Matthew joined us last year for our workshop, and you know, I didn't even know T2 existed, to be honest with you, until then. But you came and Rusty, yeah, and were one of our guest speakers. So as we were talking about changes to the speed determination, safe speed determination process, remember Heidi sort of introduced some changes, and then we took it a little bit further than that. So Matthew, we want to turn it over to you to give us a little bit of your flavor and perspective on that. And it's really around, yeah, please. And the thought was really around some of the changes going on and how do you determine safe speeds and some of the being a formula-driven process versus one that's more open to other variables was sort of what the learning I took away from our conversation. So,
Absolutely.
Please, sir.
Well, thanks for having me. I was sad that I couldn't come to the workshop because I liked it last year and it looked even better. So now I'm even more jealous, but that I wasn't able to make it. Unfortunately, I was already scheduled to present some training and couldn't be there. So, but I like that process in general. The more sort of voices you get in these discussions from different perspectives, I think, leads to better informed decision making is sort of my personal view. So amongst other, so I'm an engineer, so I'm a geek by nature, but I'm at one of those focus areas for me in recent years in particular has been speed management. Went to a peer review of 12 states and Federal Highway Administration in Colorado a couple of years ago, and over the course of 3 days managed to pretty well irritate just about everybody in the room. Because I have some contrarian views when they're appropriate. I try to be a good boy in the right places. But one of the things that drives me a bit crazy, with all due reference to law enforcement and the courts, is that I would like us to stop saying speed limits strictly enforced, because no, they're not. We're just embarrassing ourselves. And it's complicated why that doesn't happen in a lot of areas. But and one of the things I would sort of just observe about the speed limit changes on Coastal Highway that you were talking about earlier, those are interesting, and I think they'll be very instructive to watch over time. And I think I'm glad that you all have the developing relationship with DelDOT to sort of look at that and not be fixed in, and there is, I give DelDOT a lot of credit, there's a willingness in DelDOT they don't get married to an idea, and they're willing to change over time. But I think you do have to give those things some time. I'd say leave those in place, look at it, study it both from a data perspective and anecdotally over the course of a year or so, and say, did we get it right? Do we need to tweak it? Do we need to change it? Sort of my view. So just some observations about speed management. My studying of speed limits, speed management issues, those types of things, has led me to believe that we sort of think we had speed limits all figured out in the 1970s, and for the most part stopped studying it. And that's hyperbolic. So it's not entirely true, but there's something to be said about that. And it's also that research in general with transportation, there's not a lot of research that's done on local roads. We do research on highways, high-volume roads, high-speed roads, because that's where the bulk of safety incidents are perceived to be. We're learning that that's not really true, or at least that's changed statistics-wise. And so maybe that'll lead us to look at more localized roads from a research point of view over time. I hope so. The problem is we take all kinds of research that we do, not just speed-related, but design issues and things that we've developed from looking at highways, big type highways, and that say, okay, well, so that's how we design these highways. Now let's design these local roads exactly the same way. And the reality is you have very completely different environments. And I think you all, as I hear you speak, as I heard you speak last year at the workshop, I think are tuned into that. And there's a recognition at the local level that you have to look at things a little bit differently. And sometimes you can, and sometimes you can't, right? So the presiding document for speed limits, or at least the lead presiding, if such a thing exists, is the manual and uniform traffic control devices. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because nobody needs a nap this early in the day. That's why I didn't do a slide presentation. That's a sure way to get out the yoga mats, and it's all nap time. But so just to provide the framework, so the manual and uniform traffic control devices, which rolls right off your tongue, just like MUTCD, begins at a federal level. So the Federal Highway Administration is the agency that develops that, puts that out. It's been revised 11 times since 1927, and we just got a fresh new one, the 11th edition, in January of last year, I guess it was. And not a whole lot of crazy changes, but there were some interesting subtle changes in the area of speed limits, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And the way this works is, and the MUTCD is not a guidance document, all right? It is a manual, and it is codified into federal law. These are the rules of the road. And it has what I call the shalls, the shoulds, and the mays. There are shall statements that say you shall do this, you shall not do that. A stop sign shall be octagonal. That's it. It's not, we don't get creative with it. There are other things that say should, right? You should put up this kind of, an R15 pedestrian sign in these instances. But that doesn't mean you shall, right? And understanding that, and then there's the mays are option statements, right? They're guidance statements. They're saying, this is another thing to consider, to be context sensitive, et cetera. And so it's codified, you have to follow it. Now, what happens is the federal manual gets issued, and the states each have 2 years to either, they can just adopt the new manual as is, and some states do that. They can do a supplement, which like New York State used to, and they stubbornly held on to that. So they had 2 documents that you had to work from. They finally gave that up in the last go-round. Delaware, like Maryland, for a long time has done the third path, which is they've revised it and developed their own. And like anything, it just can't be less restrictive than the federal manual and things like that. And Delaware, being ornery as a state, likes to push buttons at Federal Highway Administration, which is, I think, part of why I like working in Delaware so much, because I'm ornery by nature. And I like just tweaking federal highway official people, even though they pay my bills. But I have fun with it. And because they don't really have a sense of humor. So like you talked about the VMS signs on Coastal Highway and Route 1, Federal Highway hates that. They hate it. Because DelDOT injects humor. And Federal Highway doesn't believe there's a place for humor anywhere in a highway system. And so they're a lot of fun to play around with, and I probably shouldn't do as much of it as I should. But anyway, so Delaware adopts their own revision. They're working on a revision to that 11th edition now, and By statute, they have until January of 2026. So later this fall, we should see that, and we'll see what happens. So that's just the framework, just so we can kind of understand how that works and where we are in the timeline. So as we sit here right now, the Delaware MUTCD, which applies to all roads open to the public, not just public roads. So you can have a privately maintained road. If there's not a gate that's closed and locked, or with a guard sitting at it, that road is open to the public. So it's pretty sweeping. And again, the Delaware MUTCD is codified in Delaware code, right? So it's not a guidance document, it's the rules. Now there's no sign police, right? So it's not like Federal Highway runs around, you know, in black SUVs writing tickets to municipalities for wrong signs. But there are lawyers. Are there any lawyers in here? There's too much chance there's a lawyer. I'm not going to make lawyer jokes. But I got enough trouble as it is. But there's lawyers, right? And so if someone is injured or there's a fatality, if one of the first things a good lawyer is going to do is look at the signage, the pavement markings, the signals, and so on, and say, are the shall statements followed? Or are the should statements followed? And if not, why weren't they, right? And that's the first thing they're going to go to. And they're going to say, but for you complying with the MUTCD, my client would be alive today. And they're going to win, right? So it's important that we follow it. So that's a bunch of backdrop. I don't think speed limits in general, going back to sort of the research and application by state DOTs, counties, municipalities, has necessarily kept up with some of the things you all were just talking about a few minutes ago. Again, a lot of research was done at a time where highways, and this is when I went to college, I learned about, to the extent I learned about highway design and what have you, highways were for vehicles, trucks and cars. We didn't talk about pedestrians. We didn't talk about cyclists. What are they doing on the roads? I mean, if that question came up at all, that would have been what are you talking about? Well, but along the way, from a federal level, from state level, local levels, we've developed, we call it different things. We call it complete streets. We call it multimodal design. We call it contextual sensitive design. So we have different terms we use, but it all comes down to the same thing, where we've said the roadway system, the highway system, is for all modes of travel. And so we invited in pedestrians and cyclists and what have you, and lo and behold, over time, they've come. You all have come, right? I don't think anybody's going to confuse me as a bicycling enthusiast. You know, fair enough. But I do like to walk. And so we have lots of pedestrians, lots of cyclists in the highway environment, the local road environment, et cetera. And speed limits and speed management haven't entirely kept up with that. I think there's more discussion of that now, so there's hope yet that we'll play some catch up. But that's part of our, you know, there's a disconnect in my mind, and I struggle with it as an engineer. And we have these newer fronts. You talked about e-bikes. Again, it would be easy for me to say, well, a bike's a bike. But to your point, well, no. Very, very different speeds and probably sometimes different people who would utilize that, right? Scooters have fascinated me for the last 3 or 4 years, because as I go to conferences and things like that across the country, particularly in urban environments, I'm seeing these rent-a-scooters, like rent-a-bikes. And I stand, you know, because I'm a geek, and I sort of stand at the intersection and watch traffic and interactions, and that's interesting. And the psychology of it all. And so Columbus, Ohio, I think it was where it really struck me. There were a lot of these rental e-bikes or scooters, and they were being used heavily. And they were clearly being used from people like me, out-of-towners, right? We didn't know the road network. We didn't know the local driving culture. Maybe we had a couple of tweeners at the local bar or a nice gin cocktail or two, and then we got on a scooter. I didn't. And what fascinated me was they're not allowed on the sidewalk, so they're in the roadway, and there's a huge disparity of speeds. No helmet, no pads, nothing. If they were on a bike, we would be horrified that they didn't have a helmet. But here they are, going down the road, and I still don't quite know what to make of it. And again, I think it's new to us, it's a new challenge, and as you all alluded to, we're gonna need to think more about scooters and e-bikes because it's a different mode, I think, than some of these others. So the challenges for speed management, particularly in urban environments, I think is something we ought to delve into a lot. Hopefully there's more research done on it, but I think also the kind of discussion you all have, I think all that anecdotal information is useful as well. So the point is, I don't think we've necessarily kept up with all of that, and that leads, to some disconnects. So what are those disconnects? So let's just talk about, we'll go back to the MUTCD. I think Heidi alluded to it when she spoke to you, because I saw some notes from her, or maybe I went to her website, because I don't know her, but I know of her. And she, they're obviously a group that think very deeply about this stuff. She pointed to what I believe is a misconception of what the MUTCD has historically said. There's this view that, oh, well, the MUTCD, and a lot of engineers have this misconception. Oh, well, the MUTCD says you set the speed limit at the 85th percentile speed. That's not what it says. It hasn't said that for a long time, like 3 editions or more. And by 80, just not to geek speak, by 85th percentile speed, in case it's not obvious, which it isn't always, basically we study the speeds, hopefully over a week-long period, day and night. We cull that data down, we come down, and we've got a distribution of speeds, and basically we're saying, what is the speed at which 85% of drivers are driving at or below, right? And the premise, and that's arbitrary, but the premise is 10,000 maniacs can't be wrong, right? Right, to use a reference from my generation. That a prudent driver, that most people are prudent drivers, and we can roll our eyes at that a little bit, but there's probably somewhere in there that's true-ish. What it ignores is that the highway, now there's a psychological element. The highway, the roadway, says something to us as drivers. It talks to us. It says, hey, you can drive this road like this. So if you're on a roadway that's 12-foot wide marked pavement with a 10-foot wide paved shoulder and straightaway and great sight distances, whether you're actually consciously thinking about it or not, the road is telling you, you're fine.
Yeah, go fast.
You can drive this road at 55, 65, 70 miles. You're fine. And we're slowly recognizing that, right? And we're doing some things with traffic calming, for example, right? Problem is that we'll come into an area like you all were talking about here on Coastal Highway, where you say, well, yeah, as I come down, particularly out of Bethany, and I'm on a multi-lane highway that's straight as an arrow. I can see for miles. The road's in good condition. everything speaks to me as a driver, this is a 55-mile-an-hour road. This is a 60-mile-an-hour road. Now, if it was teeming with cyclists and pedestrians, it would start to tell me a little bit of a different story, right? This is psychology 101, and I'm not telling anybody anything they don't know. I've done a lot of work, not for a while, but a lot of work here in Bethany Beach, looking at assets and looking at speed things and stuff like that. And one of the things that struck me when I first did that work, maybe 10, 12, 13 years ago, was during the season, the sheer volume of cyclists and pedestrians in this town. And again, being a geek, I stood, as Robert Frost would say, and looked and watched. And what I noticed was during the times of that peak pedestrian and cyclist activity, I saw traffic much calmer. And it's exactly the same. One of the things I ask students sometimes is, where do you think the greatest number of pedestrian crashes are? And they'll say, New York City. I go, no, you're wrong, right? Per capita, they're actually way low. Why? Because there's scads of them all the time. They're very evident. It's when you have a handful of pedestrians and cyclists that it gets tricky, and that's part of what we have out here. So one of the things, for example, to cycle back to that, is I would say, I think some of those areas, I'm driving along at 35 miles an hour, and I'm thinking, for the life of me, I don't know why I'm driving 35 miles an hour, right? Now, again, if there are peds and bikes and what have you, I go, okay, but I'm not seeing that all the time, and so psychologically, I'm going to need some law enforcement presence to say, just do it, right? So anyway, so let me go into the last piece I guess I was thinking about this. Or I guess I started it and got sidetracked. So there's this conception that the METCD says you set it at 85th percentile. Historically, what it said, and we can bring it up and look at the code, but we don't need to. That's nappy nap time. But we can if it's helpful. Historically, it has said, here's how you set speed limits. First of all, you have statutory speed limits, and we have those in Delaware. This kind of road is 55 maximum. This kind is 25. School zones are this. You've probably seen that. But you can change those. But you have to do so with an engineering study. It has to be done by an engineer. You have to collect data and you do this. And what the METCD has historically said is we begin by collecting data, computing the 85th percentile, and that guides you within that 5-mile increment. We set all speed limits at 5-mile-per-hour increments. That's a shall statement. There is no, a 23-mile-per-hour speed limit sign is unenforceable under the law. I don't suggest taking that in front of a judge, and I'm not an attorney, but it's probably a bad idea. But we should follow that, right? But basically that leads to that. But it has always, well, not always, for the last 3 or 4 versions, it has said, that being said, these other things should be taken into consideration. And they're what I would call qualitative factors, right? And there are things like, well, what is the adjoining property usage, right? Is it, are you in a wide open urban area, or are you in a commercial district? Are you in a residential district? Is there a park next, these kinds of things. What has been the crash history? What is the pace speed? And that's just a whole nother geek speak thing, but it's basically where you cluster the biggest group of, of speeds. So you may have an 85th percentile speed of, say, 28 miles per hour, but your pace speed might be 24, right? That's where the bulk of travel is going. So anyway, not to belabor it, but there are these qualitative factors, or you might call them context-sensitive factors. There's different ways you could characterize it. And that's what the last MUTCD at the federal level said. That's what the current Delaware MUTCD, which until a new one's adopted, is in place. What's interesting is that the new 11th edition federal MUTCD flips it. It's a subtle little change. It doesn't change any of the language. It just goes, and it puts the qualitative factors up front, which was kind of interesting to me, right? So, and to me, it was a sign, oh, we're evolving. Look at us, we're standing erect, right? We're beginning to say, oh, yeah, all right. It doesn't do away with that. And to me, the difference doesn't even matter. From an engineering perspective, I go, yeah, I was always taking all those into consideration to the extent they applied. But I think there was a lot of, it's like, oh, 85th percentile, we're done. It's like, no, well, you're done if you're, up at, on SR1 at Milford, but you're not done here. Along this stretch, now there's some other things, and these context-sensitive elements need to be taken into play. And so it's pulled that around. I don't know what DelDOT's going to do, or State of Delaware, I should say, but DelDOT's the lead agency on it. But I strongly suspect they will follow that lead. They would have no reason not to. But we'll see in January. Again, I think it's a nuanced thing. But nonetheless, it's important. So as an engineer, when I do a speed study, I'm looking at all those factors, particularly in an environment like this, because those qualitative factors can be big drivers. So I'll end with this, which is to say that's just the beginning, and that's historically, I think we've put too much faith in a speed limit sign. When I was director of public works in Cecil County, I remember a lady called me, and oh, thank God she was a good sport, because I could have gotten into trouble. But she was a real good sport, and she called and she said, Mr. Carter, she said, we need more no littering signs on Theodore Road. I said, I don't think so. She said, yeah, people were littering out there. I said, yeah, I know, I saw it. I said, there's 4 no littering signs right there. I said, I was out there yesterday. There's a couch. She said, yeah, I know. I said, it's leaning against the no littering sign. I said, you know that no one in America doesn't know you can't litter, right? I mean, a child knows that. You know that, right? Well, yeah. I said, okay. I said, coupled with the fact that people are putting trash against the no littering sign. I said, let's walk through this. That you think the solution here is more no littering signs. She said, oh, yeah. She said, you're right. I said, God, I never get tired of hearing that. Because, that's another thing they do in engineering school. They just, I don't know when it is, somewhere along the line, they just convince us that everything that comes out of our mouth is pure gold and that we are never wrong. And I'm like, oh, I love being right. So I'm not beyond being arrogant either. But the point is that, we put too much confidence in this. It's like we have an enforcement problem there, right? Or an education problem or something, or, maybe put up a sign that says, don't be a jerk, right? Maybe would be more impactful. It's the same with speed limits. And we really do have to look at speed limits from sort of dare I use the term, holistic approach, right? We absolutely can't do it in the absence of education and enforcement. Because, and I won't bore you with my completely unsubstantiated 3-bucket theory of speeders, but basically the idea is that you've got, some people that are just rule followers, and then a lot of us that are pretty good, just need some reminders, and then you've just always got a percentage that they just don't care. And for them, all the time, I don't care what you do, somebody needs a leather ticket book and a strobe light on their car, or they're not going to do anything. So we need those components, but we also, particularly I think when we get into the an area like this, meaning the whole beach community, right? This whole, again, it varies by degree, but we have similar kinds of stories where we have to say, I've got to incorporate also elements of traffic calming, for example. I've got to somehow telegraph to the driver, not just by way of a speed limit sign, but by other things that, whoa, you need to calm it down. Now, I think the challenge for that is harder on Coastal Highway, particularly as you get outside of town limits. It's a little easier in here because there's signs, not literal signs, but there's indicators of, okay, you're in a different environment. Out there it's tougher. When you get into some of your local community streets, or even Pennsylvania and Atlantic for that matter, there are little psychological tricks that we use. And it seems silly to imagine that they would work, but oftentimes they do, right? So we'll take a road that's paved and marked 12-foot lanes, and when we repave it, or we'll pull the markings up, whatever, and we'll put in an 11-foot lane or a 10.5-foot lane. And people will drive slower. Not all of them. That 15% in my 3-bucket theory, they're just jerks. They're going to do what they do. But the rest of us sense that the road is narrower, even though the same amount of pavement's there. We are so gullible. But it works to our favor in this instance. And psychologically, it says, this is not as safe a road as you think. You don't have as much room to play with, and it has an effect on us. There's other things we can do. Speed humps, not speed bumps. Avoid speed bumps. I'm begging you. Speed humps can be utilized. They should be used judiciously, but we tend to put too much faith in them. And used incorrectly, people will want to make up time between them. And not only do they speed up between them, but their focus goes down, right? So they don't have that broad periphery view in a place where we probably need it most. So there's a lot we could say about traffic calming measures. There's a whole toolkit of them, and I would refer you to the Delaware Traffic Calming Design Manual, I think it is. It's on DelDOT's website, and I can send you the link for it if you don't have it. I think it's pretty good. It's localized to Delaware. It's got some Delaware examples in it. And it talks about, well, this one is best used here, but not so much there, right? And so I think that particularly when you look on, getting away from the coastal highway example and getting to some of the more localized residential streets, there's a tendency to say, well, we want to drastically reduce the speed limit. And the problem is if we do that, we take that to too much of an extreme, the psychology kicks back in and we reject it altogether. And we go, well, that's just not realistic. And now I'm going to just do my thing. So we want to be careful about pulling them down too far. But we can sometimes pull them down a little bit. And that can have, again, a suggestive effect to that meaty middle of drivers that I talk about that sort of don't want to be jerks in your neighborhood, right? And particularly if we couple that with some of those traffic calming tools. And so I think, when you're looking at those, I guess what I'll end with is I encourage, because I think that this is an evolving thing finally. I think there are people across the country, researchers, engineers, others, local communities who are sort of re-looking at speed management and saying, oh, the world's changed since 1970 in terms of who's utilizing the roadways, and we should probably look at this freshly. And as we do, I think all of us should be voices in that and talk about it, but I think, we ought to look at speed management, not just from a speed limit point of view, but what we're doing sort of contextually with the road. And I think using some of those traffic calming measures with those things can be helpful. None of it will be a, cure-all pill. It just, again, drivers are going to do, and for that matter, cyclists and pedestrians. There's pedestrians under the influence, just like there's drivers under the influence. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. And the same with cyclists and what have you, right? So we will always have people who sort of march to their own drummer as highway users. What we need to do is give them the tools to use the road well and try to encourage them psychologically to sort of play along with the plan a little bit. So anyway, that's a big sort of meandering sort of approach to it, but that's sort of the state of speed management as sort of I am seeing it. I'm almost assuredly wrong. But I really do think that the more we think deeply about these in a very contextual, sensitive design, probably will get to better solutions over time. So anyway, that's, for what it's worth, what I had to say, I think.
Matthew, thank you very much. That was really awesome. When I chatted with Matthew, this was months ago, right? It was like,
Yeah, we talked
it was
probably
like
back in January or
4:30.
February.
It was 4:30 in the evening, and I'm like, what the heck? I'm going to try to call this guy, right? Whoever answers their phone anymore, right? I call him. He answers the phone and like
And you
two
couldn't
rings.
get me off the phone.
we
It's
talked till
never
like-
call me.
We literally talked till like 6 o'clock, and now I'm like, wow, this never happens anymore. But obviously, his energy, enthusiasm. So, Matthew, thank
When I
you
was
very
director
much.
of public works in Cecil County, the president of the county commissioners at that time, I had literally known since I was like 5 years old. He was my school principal and a friend of the family, but he delighted in sort of disciplining me whenever he could. And at one point, at a public meeting, whatever, it was my time on the agenda. He comes up and says, "Mr. Carter, could you briefly," and he would always do that. And then at one point I had a contract I had to bring for approval to the board for a replacement of a wastewater treatment plant. It was a small wastewater treatment plant. And it was like $8 million or something, which doesn't sound like a whole lot, but for Cecil County, it was, I think at the time, the biggest single contract that had ever been issued in Cecil County. And it was a little bit complicated because it was a design build project, so it wasn't the typical sort of, design bid build thing. This is the low bidder, here you go. So Nelson said this to me, and I said, "No, I cannot," when he told me to be brief. And he said, "I beg your pardon." I said, "Mr. Commissioner, there is no way that I'm going to try to rush through in 25 seconds or less an $8 million decision. I'm going to need 10 or 12 minutes for you to hear me lay this out, map it out, because I want you to make an informed decision. And if you want to fire me when the meeting's over, that won't be the first time, and I appreciate it, and I'll pack my boxes and go." And, and that got a laugh from everybody except Nelson Bolander. But yeah, I mean, so I have a gift for verbosity, and once you, is it Planes, Trains, and Automobile where he says, you're like a pull toy where you've got this thing and they pull and you just talk and talk and talk. So yeah, it's probably best you caught me late in the day because I was probably less energized.
So I do have one other question. Did you get because I offered if you wanted to use any charts or anything. I was just wondering if any of the council, like Jerry Morris or Pat Shapley, did they call you in advance and say, "Don't use charts"? Don't use charts. And I see.
No.
No.
No, and with like training that I do, I mean, people love to hate on PowerPoint. I love PowerPoint. And I break all the rules, right? You can't have more than 3 bullets and 7 words. And I break all those rules, mostly to annoy people because I'm in an education environment where they have all these rules. But, and that's great for training. But I think with things like this, I'm more inclined to say, let's go where it goes. So, but no, nobody coached me on that.
Inside joke.
I got you.
So any questions from the team?
I wore you all out.
Very informative.
No,
I just have a comment. I thought it was new to me about the psychology of it.
Yeah.
And I can see it, that part of my background, but I really appreciate that you shared that with us.
Yeah, it's not new, but it's newer. It's probably, I would say, since the late 90s or so, there's been, in federal highway language, they call it human factors in traffic engineering, is the term they use. But it boils down to psychology 101. And I really do think that and I think we benefit from it. I, quite frankly, in the late 90s, I thought it was a whole bunch of what the colonel called hockey puck. I thought, what a load, come on. But as you think about it, and it's like, no, it makes a lot of sense. We've got to, and again, this is part of us as engineers trying to bring down our level of arrogance. I mean, we are an arrogant field, and I'm patient zero. It's like being an alcoholic. You got to start every morning, look in the mirror, and go, "You are not all that, okay?" And just but there's a certain, again, it's well-meaning, I think, but there's this view of, well, we can design the perfect highway system all by our little selves. No, you can't. You should try, and then you have to recognize that education and enforcement are a big part of how we have safe use of the roadways for everybody. But we've got to understand that I don't care how good you do it, you will have drivers who you're assuming in all your designs that the highway user in general, driver, pedestrian, cyclist, scooterist, they're well rested, they are experienced at being a highway user, that they're not distracted by a phone or otherwise, that they're operating whatever the vehicle is, that it's got not on bald tires and bad brakes, but all of that is not true to some degree. And we will have drivers who don't operate the thing we designed the way we intended it. I can't change that. I can't design a road for somebody high on PCP, but I can recognize that, well, I don't even know whether PCP is still a thing, but I mean, but whatever, meth or whatever the hip drug of the day is, but I know there will be some of those, and the distractions, and just the fatigue, and God, what am I going to get, Uncle Charlie, and your mind drifts, and so it is, I think, slowly we as engineers have said, yeah, there's an element to that. Let me incorporate that in and recognize that I can't fully overcome that, but I can incorporate it into what we're doing. And that's sort of where traffic calming emerged and things like that. So yeah, I think it's a very important concept.
So, Matthew, if you don't mind, we have one other piece of business that we want to get to after Rosemary asks a question.
I just wanted to ask him a couple questions. That was a wonderful presentation, Matthew, and I thank you. And I would just point out that over the years, Mr. Carter has provided invaluable help to the town of Bethany Beach, and we're grateful for that. I had a question about what you were talking about with the manual and uniform traffic control devices. Two questions. First, is that the ultimate decision of the DelDOT, or does that have to go to the legislature?
I'm not an expert on the process, but it does go through the Delaware Federal Register.
Okay.
And I would assume timing-wise that probably needs to happen sometime in the earlier fall.
Okay.
But yeah, they're the lead agency on it, and they present that, and it's sort of it's a rule-making process. And it can either be very pro forma, where it's like, yeah, or it can have comments. But I think I'll anticipate your question and say, if you do have curiosity about where that is, I think reaching out to DelDOT and saying, how can I have specific areas I'm interested in weighing in on, who could I talk to about that, to make sure it's being considered. And if it's helpful, I can get you some contacts with that.
Okay. And the second question has to do with the determination of speed limits on our residential streets. Mm-hmm. And I think, as you know, over the years we've attempted to lower them, but have been unsuccessful. And with us, we laymen, you have to excuse us, perceive the 85th percentile determination to be the overriding factor in addition to crash data. And fortunately, Bethany Beach does not have a lot of crashes, and we have been unable to get volunteers to help us with that particular criteria, so we have been unsuccessful. But you seem to think that now with the qualitative carrying more weight, at least in our perception, that we might have a better chance of lowering the speed limits on certain, do I hear you theoretically speaking? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, it's affecting me. I have struggled mightily with this because the guidance that we get as engineers from research reports and you know, federal guidance and state guidance and things like that, when you follow it, for example, I've gone through desktop exercises where I've said, all right, I want to see how I could engineer down to, for example, a 15-mile-an-hour speed limit. I can't get there. The guidance doesn't take me there. And I will argue to you, and it's not always popular, I'm going to argue to you that in any instance I can think of, I wouldn't do it without a more holistic view. And that's where I'm getting to more and more is I think you certainly can take a local residential street, whatever, to 20 miles per hour if you've got the right circumstances, which oftentimes you do. But if it's, oh gosh, at one point I knew all the streets along here, but I looked at a bunch of these years ago. But you have certain streets where when there's parking on both sides, and I come down here on a July Friday, and all those spots are filled, and the remaining travel way is fairly narrow. And my observation, and I don't use a radar gun, I use a thing called a pocket radar. It looks a lot like a cell phone, and I just look like some dumb redneck checking his messages alongside the road, so I'm very surreptitious, and I don't change anybody's actions. At one point, I was doing a speed study for a town, and they said, oh, well, we'll get the data for you. And I came back, and all the data on these streets that were 25 mile per hour, all of it were, I mean, every single car was between 24 and 26 miles per hour. And I said, wow. And I said, who collected this data? Oh, the police chief did. In uniform, standing next to his cruiser. I'm like, well, see, that doesn't work. I need to see the animals in their natural habitat. But in any event, but now take that same road, and all the cars have left. Maybe it's the off season. I see this in Lewis a lot. There's a bunch of streets in Lewis like this. In the evening, when all the cars are there, very calm and relaxed. Everybody's minding their P's and Q's, because again, psychologically, they're necked in a little bit, right? Now take those away, wide open boulevard, whoosh. So it can change really dynamically. And so you have to kind of think about how that can play in. So again, I think that it is, again, it's a psychological thing that we've taken those qualitative factors and put them up front. Because it's saying, don't forget about these. Don't just start with this thing and stop, which I think less engineers have. But definitely consider these other facts, which are, again, context sensitive. That being said, I do think it's a struggle to get to those particularly low speeds. I think as we think about it more, people like me, and I'm struggling with it as an engineer, but increasingly I'm thinking you might be able to do that if you married that with certain traffic calming elements, where you're not just saying, I'm going to set this, and by God, people are going to obey the sign. No, they're not. Not without a police officer, they're not. But if I can marry it with something that says, hey, there's a reason for this. And again, I'm psychologically sending them cues, and they go, okay, I can do that, you know, or I can do something close to that. There was a resident in Lewis, I was talking about speeding, this was several years ago, and she said, I loved the line, because I said, I just don't think you can get there, and she said, yeah, but 15 might get us 25. And I thought, that's a pretty good line. I don't agree with it, but I like the sentiment, right? And I saw where she was coming from with it. But yeah, I think it's going to cause us to evolve in our thinking about it and force more contextually sensitive approaches to speed limits. And maybe we'll develop better approaches to sort of that more holistic look, particularly as we get to those more localized streets, which is where I think the research breaks down a little bit. I don't know whether that answers your question. So.
And then just one more question. With the speed limits that DelDOT has recently set on Route 1, is there a logic behind some of it? Because some of it, there are areas where it's 35 miles an hour, and yet here it's higher, and the 35 doesn't seem to be appropriate for that particular area.
Well, it's 35 right through here, right? All through Bethany on Coastal Highway.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you all are better versed on what the discussions have been about those recent changes. There's a certain degree of arbitrariness of where do we do this one to, et cetera. And I'm curious, you know, about how that's going to play out, right? Again, in the absence of sort of a law enforcement presence, because it's, I think for some, and I've been down here doing some work in South Bethany, so I've been back and forth all week here, and I've been watching, and I drive right around the speed limit everywhere I go, not because I'm a great guy, I am. If my mother was still alive, you could ask her, she'd tell you. But because I want to know how the road operates as stated, because I'm a geek. And what I notice is I've got people, you know, coming out of Bethany, and I can just see in the rearview mirror, they're like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm following the law. I have these little conversations in my truck, and like they were sitting next to me because I'm nuts. And then, you know, eventually it's like, oh, okay, take it. And they're cooking along, right? But then there's others like, yeah, he's probably right. You know, and there's this whole little dynamic going on. It's fascinating to watch. And again, it's my 3-bucket theory. There are some that go, well, this is just ridiculous. I'm not arguing that they're correct. I mean, but again, we need to understand, how is this playing out? And I mean, you know that before they pulled out around me, they went, I'm going, right? Because Johnny Law is not around. And I reject this 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. I'm on a multi-lane highway that I can see forever. There's not a cyclist, a pedestrian anywhere. Again, not defending the viewpoint, but those cues matter to a bunch of drivers, to a lot of drivers. It'll be interesting to me to see. Now, sometimes culturally, we'll just shift to it. It's like, yeah, okay, well, it's 35 through here. And a lot of us probably will just do it, and that's fine. It'll be interesting to watch. I think it's a good experience or experiment. Yep.
Thank you, Rosemary. Excellent.
Did I wear everybody out?
Mitch, if you wouldn't mind, can you hang around for just a little bit?
Yep.
So if anyone from the audience has any other questions, and if you can, I'd love to take you out to lunch when you get done.
I'm your Huckleberry. So
Okay.
Thank
Awesome.
you for putting up with me.
So one other thing, thank you, Andrew. It's really good. Awesome. Appreciate it. So the next thing I'd like to, I think it's, well, this thing keeps freezing on me. I just want to get to the if you could just advance to the next chart, the traffic group report, yep. And so this was just a quick overview I put together. What I want to do is get your thoughts on this, and depending on, I don't know how much time you all were able to put into this. If you want, we can always defer this to the next meeting. What we wanted to do, though, is have us have a conversation about it so that we can provide our insights, and then we want to be able to get it out to the community, because the community, this was for the community, right? So these are just a couple thoughts I had. So this is this report, right, what I'm talking about, and I think you all got it either hard copy or digitally. They're trying to apply, you heard Heidi speak to it, Matthew talked about it, this whole idea of complete street principles, right, is very much in the beginning. They sort of broke it into a couple pieces. Again, I'm not going to go through every scenario, but it seemed like for Atlantic and Pennsylvania, that was one of the key focus areas, and then 26 was on this side was in the area, that if you put signalized controls, right, they generally result in longer queues, right?
Very long queues in this case.
Yeah, so they're typically not very viable, right? Okay, I don't know if that surprised anybody, and they have all the data here, and they did the simulations and the whole thing, but that's generally what came up with. You would get shorter queues if you went with potentially one-way, two-lane options, right?
Right, so Pennsylvania would be one way,
And
Atlantic would go the other way, and it would be two
And they
lanes.
looked at it both ways, one going north, one going south, and
Yeah, I
vice
mean,
versa.
it's still backups, though.
Yeah, it's still backups. So, but the key with that is you start putting those kind of controls on it, you have to have two lanes.
Yes, it doesn't
Right.
work with one lane.
If you do it with one lane, right, and the other goal they're trying to do is, the challenge is to get these 10-foot pathways, right, for pedestrians, bikes, walkers, and the like. And if you do that, if you want the 10 feet, then that tends to impinge upon having two lanes, right? It almost says one lane, and that creates gridlock. I mean, we'd have people backed up into South Bethany just about. So that was generally the takeaways from it, right? I mean, there's something to look at. I mean, there's something to, but if you did go with the one way, you'd have to have two lanes. So you have two lanes of traffic going out, two lanes of traffic coming back. The challenge with it is how much space do we have, right? There's generally less space on the other streets than there, if you think about South Atlantic, right? That is a broader boulevard now. We don't have that on the north end, for example. Those are sort of the challenges. For Garfield Parkway, this is just my takeaways from it.
Yeah.
I mean, you all can, and we can just sort of, I'm going to ask you to add to this either today or later. The thing they looked at Garfield, now we have done some things with Garfield. We're putting a crosswalk in already. But they did sort of talk about combining sidewalks and bike paths to create a larger separation, right? Actually combine it, because we have sort of a sidewalk, bike path. They actually talked about this idea of combining that, but then putting a harder separation from vehicular traffic. Bill, you talked about that a little bit. And then the last thing they talked about in that was a pathway, and this was around pedestrian and bicycles, connect the east and west sides. They're basically central, right? You know, the property up here. You know, the pathway through the wetlands to connect this as a way of getting people off of 26. Those were sort of the key takeaways I had from reading this, and I went through it a few times to the point where I didn't think I could read it anymore. So, any thoughts, upgrades, perspectives? If you want more time to reflect on this, you all might have seen things completely different than I did, and there's nothing. This is just my takeaways, but.
Well, just a couple of things. One of the things that leaped off the page at me was they said there's a shoulder that's marked on Garfield Parkway, but it's not clear that it's a bicycle lane. And I rode my bike in it this morning, and every block there is an indication that this is the bike lane and a sign on the sidewalk that says no bikes on sidewalk.
No bikes on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was, that didn't make any sense to me. The other thing is, I mean, I thought they were very thorough in discussing the one-way options, but they didn't have a strong conclusion, but I think the conclusion would be it doesn't get us past the status quo, and they don't take flooding on Pennsylvania into consideration, which of course would turn the one-way Pennsylvania into a complete nightmare. So I think, you know, like good social scientists, they said, well, other things being equal, but we know Pennsylvania is not equal if there's been rain. I thought the crash data on Garfield Parkway, Route 26, I thought that was very interesting, that's where really the problems are, and so having the median and the beacon will hopefully be helpful, and that's what they recommend, and that's what we're doing, so I thought that was great. And then, yeah, that they came to the same conclusion as we heard in the workshop in the fall, and that Bill brought up about combining the sidewalk and the bike lane and reconfiguring that I thought was an important one.
Thank you, Mark. You know, be honest, that the whole flooding thing, I didn't even think about. So that is particularly around
That's a
the
great point, right.
one-way piece. Yep. Anyone else have any additional insights that? So what I propose is that we'll summarize this, we'll add that, and basically share back to the rest of the council, and then we can decide how we want to disseminate this to the community or make it available. We wanted to. Matthew, since we did chat a little bit about this first, I knew you were going to be here, and we took the liberty of sharing this with you. Again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. Anything jump out at you that, from a learning perspective, that we didn't capture here?
No, I mean, my memory, because that was, I think, a month or two ago.
Yeah.
Drawing off my memory of it, but, oh, I'm sorry. But my memory is that I was seeing it as a fairly high-level look, right? And I think, again, I've seen the flooding down here once or twice. I didn't know how prevalent that was, but if that has any regularity at all, that's a great observation that I hadn't thought about.
No,
And because, you know, I mean, there's a lot to be said about taking. So the classical way we would often do it is like with the various side streets through here, where sometimes there's a benefit to making, you know, them one way for a variety of reasons you might do. It's an interesting tool, and you very much need to think about, well, which direction does this one need to go, and it can start arguments, and it's a fun time. But it can have some benefits with that. But yeah, I mean, on the general topic of these multi-use paths, shared paths, and or separated bike and pedestrian, there's a lot of different thinking that goes into that I think, again, you know, one way is probably great in one setting, and another you go, that doesn't work as well. You know, this is another area where I think there's been a lot of more recent, meaning in the last 5-10 years, experimentation. You probably have seen what Newark did with the bike path on Delaware Avenue. I will tell you that when they were building it, I thought, boy, I just don't see it. As I've watched it for 2 to 3 years, I forget how long it's been active now, it's been really, I think it's been generally positive. Newark and DelDOT and the University of Delaware will tell you it's not ideal. They're not sure they would do it exactly the same way if they were to do it again. But generally, I think it's been a positive, right? And some of the elements there were that physical separation, albeit with a, I don't know, 3-inch curb. It's not that you can't go over it, but when your tire rubs, again, it's the psychology, right? I can remember, oops. But one of the things with any kind of demarked shared pathway next to a vehicle travelway that I think we're still struggling a lot with and should be paid attention to is, what do you do about turning, left or right turning traffic that's going to cross over that? Because that's one of the things they put a lot of thought into the Delaware one with, and they got it probably 75% right, which is not bad. That's still, I think, a conflict point. There have been some near misses because, again, somebody said something earlier in this meeting about that alluded to this idea that for the driver, I'm looking this way because I'm thinking about cars. I'm not thinking, and again, this is as we evolve more and more culturally as road users, we'll probably get better at that, but that's a bit of a problem because as you're coming down and you're going to turn left, well, you're seeing bike traffic or pedestrian traffic coming down this way, but you're not necessarily, and let's face it, the bike traffic is the thing. The pedestrian isn't going to sneak up on me as fast, but a more professional bicyclist might be cooking along at a pretty good speed. I may be turning left and not even, they're in my blind spot. So I don't know of any magical solutions to it, but that's an element to think about those dedicated bike lanes. There have been some things where we put green pavement paint down to draw that out to your attention for the drivers. That's had some positive effect. So there's a bunch of tools to think about. And what I would suggest is, as you dig deeper into this, get some of those other, ask Tom Coleman from the city of Newark and Tim Flasky what they think, because they'll give you an unvarnished view on it, right? There's no pride of authorship with those guys. They're like, yeah, we got it largely right, but I don't know that we do it exactly this way again. Some of the folks in Delta, I think, are real introspective about it. It's an experiment, and I think you could learn from that. But there's been some other approaches as well, and I think hearing from other voices and learn from their experience would be good.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, if it's okay with you all. Let's put something in, just to note the the flooding issue.
Yep.
I think that's a really awesome upgrade that completely blew by me about this. And then we'll let the council and how we're going to communicate. Okay, let's just move into the next. So this is our focus area. As you've seen this chart many times before, we completed a workshop. The next thing really up is the Ocean to Bay table that we want to talk about. Thank you, Julie. You're looking
I'll
like
participate. Well, basically, they want to know if we're participating.
Right.
Because when I last spoke with the chamber, they said no one had contacted them, and this was a couple weeks ago. So if we do in fact want to have a table, getting one over there is not an issue. It's just making sure they have a spot for us.
And so this would be for the Friday, right?
Correct.
Or
It'd be next Friday, the 2nd.
Friday.
Next Friday.
That's the best time, because again, people are coming to pick up their packets and everything. On Saturday morning, basically everybody's just trying to go out to ride. They're not going to sit and talk.
Yeah.
Friday afternoon, we have a better chance of, engaging people, which I think is what the objective is, and especially later in the day, because a lot of people will be, that's what I found last year. Again, last year we had 2 groups. We had one group, I think,
Diane and I.
right, you were in the first group, I think you were from 12 to 2, roughly. And then Mark and I were there from 2 to 4, and then I stayed around till 7 because there were more people coming through. But I think it was a positive experience. We did have T-shirts that we handed out last year, which helped draw people in because, again, these people are busy, And we were like, hey, can we, talk for a minute? We've got a free T-shirt here for you, and they would come over and talk with us. So we did have shirts last year, which helped draw people in. But again, part of this is just availability. Are people available next Friday to man a table? Unfortunately, I'm going to be in North Carolina with a family event, so I'm not going to be here. But if people are here, I think it would be worth supporting the event, because again, this is probably the biggest bicycle event of the year in terms of Bethany. I think the last couple of years they've had over 2,000 people participate. So this would give us an opportunity. I mean, even if we only talk with 40 or 50 people over the course of the afternoon or less, it could be very productive.
Have you reached out to them about having a presence there?
Pardon me?
Have you reached out to anyone at the chamber? I think you were the point person last year that did it.
No, I didn't reach out to the chamber last year. I haven't done it this year.
Well, but I thought you followed up because you kind of you coordinated the table, didn't you, the effort?
Well, what I did last year basically is just scheduled people. In other words, again, we decided we'd break it up.
Okay.
And again, Friday afternoon is nice because again, people are coming to pick up their packets, and it's also one of the 2 days where you can do the coastal cruise,
Yeah.
which is just the trip out to under the bridge and then back.
And that's what they recommended for us to be a part of, reaching out to those people, because the pros tend to know the rules and the ins and outs, where they feel that the education needs to be directed to the cruisers.
Exactly.
So another option is putting some literature in the packets.
If they'd be
They're
willing to
still-
do that, I think, if we could have the brochures for WAVE in there, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, it depends on how many. If they need 5,000, I don't know if I'll have that many for next week, but
Again, you had to talk to the chamber in terms of exactly how
I'll
many
reach
people
out to them
signed up.
and
I
see.
think the deadline is passed for people to register, at least online. I think you might be able to do a coastal cruise
So-
walk-in sign up, but I think the regular rides are all taken.
So just to keep us moving, again, based on the experience we had, and I would participate the year before and had a lot of great conversations with people. I think it's really worthwhile. Let's go ahead and plan. Julie, can you reach out?
Yeah.
And then over the next couple of days, let's just, and we'll actually update I've got the spreadsheet in here next. We can update who's available when.
Yeah.
And we'll staff it to the degree we can. I mean, if people, and we shouldn't have folks having to be there all day. It would be just a couple hour increments would be great, and whatever we do is additive, so.
No, I think that'd be great.
Good.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Julie, or do you want us?
sure. No, I will.
If we
Not a
just get
problem.
that piece, and then we'll work on the stuff.
Yeah.
And if we need to pack anything in advance or stuff anything.
We should also talk about the Poseidon Festival.
Yep.
No, that's,
So you all can't see this. You all have in front of, this is Art's spreadsheet that he keeps for us around the events and activities. You all have a copy of this in front of you as well. So if we focus, what I encourage everyone to do is take a look at your calendars.
Right.
And let's just go through and we'll give our update to Art
okay.
for the dates we have. But for the Poseidon event,
Right. Those are just the two that are going,
happening sooner, yeah.
And then the following week, or 2 weeks later, would be the craft show. And that,
I thought we decided not to do the craft show.
No, the fall one.
It was the fall one? Okay, okay.
for the fall one, we could put an ad in their program. That would at least be some presence
Right.
and eyes in front of a lot of people.
All I know about the craft show is I manned the table late in the afternoon when there was nothing to give away
Nothing
and no
left.
one stopped.
Yeah,
Like, there's no point in being there if there's nothing to give away.
yeah. And you have to be, as a participant, you have to be there all day at the table. You can't leave
Right,
early.
so I'm not sure this makes sense. I mean, because I sat there and talked to like 2 people. I sat there 2 hours.
Okay.
And one of them was somebody I knew.
So, just if I can just weigh in on that, because I was actually before you.
Right,
And
the year
I'm the one who
before,
gave
yeah.
away all the
Yeah,
T-shirts.
right.
And to be honest with you, I was there by myself, and it was packed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to have conversations with people, and I've got people asking me, can I get an extra small for Susie and a,
Yeah, they like free stuff.
and be honest with you, I'm not really excited about just giving stuff out
Yeah.
without the conversation. I want to talk
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
Not that it's, but that's where the connection changes,
Right.
you know? I mean, that's where the input has, and
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like here's a, hey, thanks for the conversation, we have a,
Sure.
rather than just, hey, let me get my T-shirt so I can get to the next table down the road here.
Right,
And,
but so You can have that at the Poseidon Festival.
Yes.
That happens at the Poseidon.
Yes.
I
did.
just,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure it's a good use of our time. I
Yeah.
don't know that it, and it's very weather dependent. You did it 2 years ago, and you were sitting there with your grandkids.
Right,
It was miserable outside.
right. Let's do this. Let's do the Poseidon. Definitely.
Yeah, let's
And
let's
that's a
push-
great
let's
event. And
push
then
that.
let's just sort of
5:30 to
table
7.
to, give it some thought about the craft thing.
Yeah.
Because we need to have, the key with that, you got to have multiple people there
You do.
if you're.
For
you
the
know,
whole thing.
For the whole thing. Or just have or just be there for a smaller block of time.
No, but we
right?
can't do that. They make you
You,
staff
you
the
could do
table.
shifts. You could do
But
one
the
person,
table
2
has to
hours
be
at a time.
staffed the whole time.
Right, so
Can't
you
leave the
divide,
table empty.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I just loop back for 1 second, just so we're all on the same page here, because we've got basically a week to prepare for the Ocean to Bay if we're going to do it. So are you going to reach out to the chamber just to see if we are, again, can still do it? And then in turn, we get a confirmation out, then people will, sign up or commit to doing a time, and then in turn, we can, get the supplies and everything, and the tablecloth and everything over there.
Yeah,
So that there'll just be an email going back and forth, and then people can sign up, and we can schedule, and we'll go accordingly. The only other thought I would have in terms of engagement, this is off the,
Well,
This
you
is
know,
really
and
off
Art,
the-
let me just keep, if you can do that, let me take the point, you did that last year, I'll take the point with us, the logistics of
Okay.
who, what time, and whatever we're doing. Is that okay?
yeah,
Just
I'll
so we-
find out exactly what
That's-
time the table will be there,
Yeah.
and then.
Yeah,
let
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
but if we, let's get the table, let's get in it.
Yeah,
perfect.
And then
The
I'll
only-
work the logistics with us to figure out what we
Perfect.
hand out and our staffing.
Great. The only other thought I would have, this is kind of out of the box, but one of the thoughts I would have in terms of giving out a T-shirt is maybe have people come over and answer one question to get a T-shirt, right? And the one question would be, here's some thoughts we have in terms of enhancing safety communications to the community. Which do you think we should emphasize? And then, again, if we have a list like, wear a helmet, wear reflective gear, blah, blah. If
we're
we have
getting
this
input
list, and
from
it kind of, it promotes a conversation. And if it's one question, it's very simple, and in turn, you get a T-shirt. But it would foster for them to kind of
Yeah,
mentally
yeah.
go through a bunch of things,
Yeah.
and in turn, develop the relationship. So just a thought, but
Yep.
that might work.
That's helpful.
No, I think that's a good, and a little bit of structure on what we're asking actually will help us with what we get back, rather than just, excellent, good. So I'll do the who, what, when, and Julie, if you could just do the
Why?
administrative piece with,
yeah.
awesome, thank you. So the other things, let's just, again, Art shared this with us. I think this is the latest copy, Art.
I think so.
I can send it out again this
So
afternoon.
if you could send it to everyone, and just, what I'd like you to do is just try to look at your schedule for some of these other events, the bike rodeos,
Right.
the J1, to that, when you're available, and then we can work that way.
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah, the other
And
event
just give your input directly to Art, and
Yes.
he'll compile it for us.
Sure. The only other thing that we may want to just see if we can get an invitation to is I think the Mariners Bethnal Bike Distribution Days were very informative and helpful. So if we are invited to participate in those days, which I think are probably in early June, I think that would be advantageous to all of us.
Okay.
So again, all these are a matter of we can only participate if we're encouraged to and invited.
So, do you want, I'll be glad to reach out to Mike.
If
He
you
did
wouldn't mind.
invite us last year.
Yeah,
Mike did, he invited us last year, and some committee members went.
yeah.
No, I know, I'm talking about
okay.
for this year. You're talking
Yeah, so I'm talking about for this year. If Mike,
Oh, I know, he wants,
Yeah,
because,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I think he'd be very, very, but that's a good idea. I'll reach out to Mike and just,
yeah, just so we're prepared.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Okay, so we'll work on updating that, and I think that's it. These are just our upcoming dates. We said July was tentative, right? Didn't we?
Yeah, we
agree with
did.
that? So it's only if we need it, but those are sort of the dates we're looking toward, okay? And that's it. So do we have given the timing, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, sure. Can you go to the microphone?
You sure can.
Yeah.
I just want to get, yeah.
He's been sitting.
Hi, Lee Bunting, 84 North Atlantic Avenue.
Hey, Lee, how you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing, right?
Good.
I'm interested in this traffic group report, and I have 4 questions. When was the contract signed for this report, for this study?
A couple of years ago, we'd have to go back and look. It
Can you
was
get, can you
dated-
get that, can you get that to me? Okay. How much did it cost? Why did it take so long to come to, to a report? And can I get a copy of it?
So the cost, well, we can
Have
get,
to
we'll
look
get
it all
that to you.
up. I
We'll
mean,
we'll
we'd
get
be
to you.
giving you estimates at this point, but I think we can get it to you. So hold on, 3 questions. The cost,
4.
the date of the contract.
Date of
can
the
you get a
contract.
copy? Diane has a copy. We'll see if we're gonna, we should make it public, right?
Yeah, that's what we're doing after. That's why we wanted to get this committee to have a chance to look at it.
Right.
And the whole idea is to make it available and put it on the website. But that's,
Okay, so hold on.
The
Cost-
complete report?
huh?
The complete report?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, the free
I
report
mean,
will be
the
online.
town
I
paid
mean, the
for
whole
it, so
thing,
it's-
the whole thick thing. I don't want just a summary.
understood.
No, I know, you
Yeah.
can, yeah.
All right, so
Hold on, I'm sorry. The cost, the date of the contract, you want a copy. What was the 4th thing?
why did it take so long to come out?
That I can answer. So the answer is, we didn't like the results we were getting, and the town kept pushing back. There's a lot of data here, there's not a lot of recommendations.
Okay.
That's why it took so long.
Oh, and I had one more.
Okay.
When this was talked about originally, it was said that this study will help us get some grants. And is that the case? And if so,
I don't
can
know
you
if
share
it-
some information about that?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if it's helped yet.
Wait,
Hold on.
Rosemary has
The
an answer.
consultant has offered to apply for a planning grant for the Safe Streets for All program, and we're
Right.
investigating that now.
Good.
Looking at that.
That's it.
Okay,
Okay.
So I will hear from somebody?
yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And I apologize for jump. Anyone else have, from the folks who are here? My apologies, Lee, I was sensitive. to
This is
time.
a long meeting. We're just trying to, like. It's, we had too much stuff on our agenda. We just had too much stuff on our agenda.
So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Lee, Teresa? Okay. Vote?
All in favor?
All in favor? Okay, great. Everybody have a great week. I'll jump on the logistics of the bike information and figure out who we need to get staffed and what we'll do. Thank you.
No, thank you. Sorry, I'm not here.
No, I know. You
Thank you. It was a good meeting.